You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to the Mike on the Right show. I am your host, your favorite conservative podcaster, Mike Neal. This is episode 18, the date, September 2nd, 2025, and we are broadcasting from the heart of the heartland in central Indiana, the crossroads of America, the great Hoosier State. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Please continue to like and share and subscribe, follow, 5-star ratings wherever you listen to this podcast, whether it's audio or video, YouTube. What you're doing is working. We are having great growth with the show this past month, and it is because of you. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get right to today's topic because while this discussion we are about to have is spurred by what just happened in Minnesota, this has been an evolving discussion in America. And before I begin the show today, I want to express my heartfelt compassion and heartfelt sadness for those who were lost in the Annunciation Catholic School and Church cowardly murder and attack against students praying at their school, first week of school, in their church. We can't pretend that this will go away. We can't pretend that, we always talk about thoughts and prayers, and we should be thinking, and we should be praying, and we should be comforting, and we should be there. But faith without works is dead. And so, this is, we're going on vacation this weekend. This is obviously being released on Tuesday, the day after Labor Day. You're listening to this on Tuesday or after that. I'm recording this on the Thursday prior because my family and I are headed to Michigan for a wonderful trip, just the three of us, me, my wife, and my son. And so some of the things you might hear may be a little bit backdated, but I'm going to try to stay away from the reoccurring events and more focus on the overall overarching conversation we should be having today. And so I'm titling this episode, Protecting Our Children While Preserving the Second Amendment. And why am I having this conversation now? This is one of the third rails of American politics. Social Security, Second Amendment, those are two of the big ones. And I'm hitting one of the two of those today because we cannot continue to pretend that things like this aren't happening. But we also get the rhetoric of all sides. There are absolutists on both sides. Nobody should have weapons. Everybody should have weapons. And then everything in between. And what we have to do as Americans is we cannot pretend this is not an issue, but we can also not pretend that the assault on the Second Amendment isn't exacerbated by situations like these. And we have to marry the two in order to come to common sense solutions in America. And I may have some of my conservative friends who get mad at me today, and I really do feel bad about that. But as someone who has a 2-year-old son and will one day have other kids, it hits home for me that this can happen anywhere. There is no law, there is no ideology, there is no party, there is nothing that owns evil. There's evil everywhere in every place, and there's no one group more evil than others. Evil is evil across the human race. And so today we're going to talk about the two commitments that we have to make at the same time and meld the two to ensure that rights and safety are met. We will protect our kids. And beyond that, anyone, people at work or what have you, but because of what happened in Minnesota, I'm specifically focusing, and I'm watching the news right now. To people are continuing to cover what's going on at the church. we will protect our kids and we will preserve our constitutional rights. And the goal today is not a perfect solution, because this conversation needs to happen across the whole of government, the whole of the nation. And it's also not to come up with some perfect slogan, some soundbite that we can beat somebody over the head with on either side. The goal is fewer funerals for our children. Rights and safety are not enemies of each other. In America, we must insist on both. And it is time we have that conversation without taking away the rights of law-abiding citizens and not allowing things like what happened in Minnesota to continue unchecked. We can't have it. So real quickly, let's go over what occurred in Minnesota. On August 27th, 2025, during an all-school mass at the Annunciation Catholic School and Church in southern Minneapolis, Minnesota, an attacker fired 3 weapons, a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol from outside the windows of the church, knowing good and well that there were a number of children in the pews praying on their first week of school. 2 children, ages 8 and 10, were killed, 17 others injured, 14 of them being children, 3 being elderly parishioners. And officials said that the injured were expected to survive, thank God. But for the parents and families of the 2 children that passed in their pews, I am so heartbroken for you. The shooter was identified after he cowardly killed himself, by the way, 23-year-old Robin Westman, who changed his name, and we'll get into that in a second, to Robin. That was not his given name. Killed himself at the scene. And federal officials, of course, have referred to Robin as a she because Westman was a transgendered individual. Investigators say that multiple firearms were used, as I said before, and they were legally purchased in recent months. Now, I have not looked further into that at the time of this episode. There's obviously a lot going on. This is an active situation, an active investigation. And so I'm certainly going to be behind on a couple of those things as you hear this episode. The motive in the investigation, the FBI, the ATF, Minnesota State Police, the City of Minneapolis Police, agencies across the whole are assisting. And officials are reviewing a manifesto and some online writings that were found on YouTube, which, by the way, were posted the morning of the attack, and YouTube's system never flagged. And now look, the reason that kind of honks me off is yes, nothing in the system is ever perfect, whatever. But I get throttled all the time for conservative content immediately. And the fact that this had to be taken down well after the attack and other people have seen it and found it is a problem, and it needs to be addressed. And this is being investigated as a cowardly hate crime, domestic terrorist attack on Catholics, targeting Catholics specifically. And Mr. Westman went to this church at one point, went to this school at one point, and I believe I read that the mother worked at the school at some point. Of course, the community response has been vigils and prayers and statements from local and national leaders across the whole. Flags ordered at half-staff by the President of the United States, and the school community, in the midst of all of this, is grieving and reeling as the year has just begun. Who shoots at praying children? A coward shoots at praying children. A coward hurts any child. And if targeting a church isn't domestic terrorism and a hate crime, what is? Now, of course, details are continuing to develop, and more is going to come. But let's talk about this overall. I wanted to give you, I don't want to get into the details of what happened any further than I have, because I want to talk about, we have to start discussing solutions to this problem. But what is the problem? Well, first of all, let's look at overall the rights and responsibilities and principles first. The Second Amendment is a constitutional position. It is not up for repeal. Freedom is not a bargaining chip. However, and this is where conservatives are going to start to get mad at me, and I am a knuckle-dragging right-wing conservative. I believe in the Constitution as originally written. I believe that our rights come from God and not man and not government, and that it is government's job to protect our rights and to protect religion from overreach by others in the government. I believe in those principles. However, government does have a legitimate interest in preventing dangerous individuals, violent criminals, people with mental health issues, etc., people that have been adjudicated as a danger to themselves or others, from obtaining guns. And what we need to focus on is targeted due process of policing of dangerous behavior and those who should not have weapons for the reasons stated above, not blanket punishments for the millions of responsible owners, such as myself, because of the shortcomings of others. But again, that doesn't mean we should ignore it. We don't fix evil by criminalizing the innocent. But we also don't fix evil by sitting idly by and saying, well, Constitution says you have the right to bear arms. Something has to change. How do we keep guns from dangerous people without punishing the law-abiding citizens of our nation? First, we have to enforce existing laws. We have to prioritize prosecution of straw purchasers and traffickers. We need to focus on ATF, U.S. attorneys, and ensuring that they have the tools to stop repeat offenders. We also have to find a way to stop these people in their tracks before it starts. And we talk all the time about backing the blue. I am a huge supporter of police, and we have to give them the tools to stop these things in their tracks. And that means connecting what they already have with mental health records and what have you, or whatever that system looks like, in order to tip people off at the earliest possible time. And then also the system that allows them to these individuals to buy guns, to flag them from the purchase. Maybe there are risk orders with strict guardrails. And that shouldn't just be decided by a doctor, and that shouldn't just be decided by a government bureaucrat. I believe this needs to be done in the court system. There needs to be a high evidentiary bar, judge-signed, immediate hearings, right to counsel, penalties for false claims, automatic time limits, and certainly the order needs to be reviewed time after time, that nothing should ever be permanent in that regard. For those of imminent risk. If the standard is high and the process is fair, we can act fast without shredding rights. We need to continue to push secure storage culture. Now, some of this is not related to Minneapolis. This is overall gun policy in America. We need to have child access prevention norms in the community for farmers and hunters and 4-H, and we need that type of education. And again, the millions of law-abiding citizens already do this. We have to continue to push that. We need temporary safe harbor storage programs at ranges and gun shops during a personal crisis. Just give options and possibilities for these things to occur, not forcible removal from lawful individuals. We also need to focus on, and I'm going to get to the mental health piece. Please stay with me. There's a lot to this. And mental health is the biggest part of this, but I want to get through this entire monologue that I've written. So please stick with me. This is not some rah-rah NRA flag waving. We also have to focus on personal responsibility and not blaming the tool. We don't blame cars for drunk driving. We blame drivers who are drunk while driving. We have to hold the driver accountable for the misuse. The same principle has to apply to firearms. A car can be safe or it can be deadly. It depends entirely on the responsibility of the person behind the wheel. Guns, weapons are no different. Because we see people taking cars and running down streets. We just saw that, not too long ago in Louisiana. We've seen it across the world. An evil person is going to commit an evil act. Now, certainly the availability of tools can make that harder or easier depending on what it is they're looking to do, how they're looking to do it. Certainly. I at all do not dispute that. But society doesn't ban cars because of these type of things. We shouldn't be banning guns wholesale because of these type of things. And this whole made-up thing about assault weapons. A weapon is a weapon is a weapon. Certainly, weapons with higher capacity certainly can cause more damage. Law-abiding gun owners shouldn't be punished for the actions of criminals or a mentally unstable individual. Rights aren't collective, they're individual. Personal responsibility is the key ingredient. Safe storage, proper training, knowing the law, respecting the power of the tool, those who are unfit to carry it, having a process to keep them from doing so, and honestly, giving a police officer in Nevada the ability to see these same records if the person's from Massachusetts or Georgia. I'm not talking about a national registry of guns. I'm against that. But the records should be seen in any and every state if someone should not be purchasing a weapon. And there should be immediate background checks. We can do that instantly today for anything. You get that for jobs and all kinds of things, right? I've gone under so many background checks for the government positions that I've held. Multiple, in fact. We should be doing that for this, and they can be instantaneous. And it should pull these records, no matter where you're purchasing a firearm. But not a national registry, how many people have how many guns. But this data should be available to law enforcement because that's how we stop this at the end of the day. Mental health records and documents and that going to a judge to say, hey, this person isn't fit to hold guns for a year, and we'll come back in a year and look at it, or whatever that time frame looks like. And they should be barred from purchasing those. And then, of course, we have to continue to come down on illegal gun trade. And yes, people argue about this all the time about gun shows. 100%. There should be the same instantaneous background check on site. That's common sense. That's not anti-gun. That's not anti your right. But it needs to be confirmed that you're not unstable by court order using medical records and medical expert advice and having the right to due process. We need to continue to teach young people to drive safety. We should be encouraging firearm education, culture of respect, not fear, and the focus must be on behavior and not the object. Misuse is a moral and legal failing, not a flaw in the tool itself. We don't take away cars because of drunk drivers. We punish irresponsibility and protect everyone else's freedom. Guns should be no different. Juveniles with violent histories and background checks, all of this information should be available. Where lawful, with due process, allow adjudicated violent juvenile records to inform the purchase of denials for limited periods be available. Ensure mental health prohibitors, again, where adjudicated. Actually make it into the system. Make it a requirement. Every little thing I do in my car, if I get pulled over, without having a seatbelt, or if I speed, or if I crash, all of that crap is on my BMV record. From this time I started driving, I could log in right now and I could take a look at that. And you're telling me that we can't put the same type of system together for those who have been deemed a danger to public or themselves? You got to be kidding me. We got to target illegal possession and threats and criminal misuse and manifestos that got missed by YouTube, but they're going to block Mike Neal the moment after he posts a video. Bull crap. there has to be a process and a system out there that we can get the majority of people to agree on so that things like this do not occur again. But evil is evil, is evil, is evil. As a Christian, I agree with that. I believe in that. We're a fallen world. But that doesn't mean that we sit on our hands and say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Faith without works is dead. And I have faith that this won't happen again. But I'm going to work hard. We have to work hard as a society to balance these two. Now I want to get to the core of this. Because what I believe is actually happening here today in America with all of these violent gun offenses is the abdication of mental health in America. And not just in our doctor's offices and hospitals and wherever else, in our homes. Generations have ignored, you just have to get up and dust yourself up. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I agree with those in general principle. But we have set aside emotion and mental health and what that does to us. And we are seeing an absolute decline in mental health in America. We've been seeing it for years and we've ignored it. The central theme here must be mental health, isolation and fixation and ideation and grievance building and threat signaling before attacks. I remember when I was at Valparaiso High School, that's where I graduated, 2005. It was actually my junior year, so this would have probably been like 2003. I think it was right before Thanksgiving. And a student who had certainly been just a weird dude brought knives to school and stabbed a bunch of students, my friends. And of course, that wasn't a gun, so it was a little bit different. Nobody died, which was really great, but people were injured. This has been happening for years and years and years, and there are warning signs, and we have had a generation that has ignored the mental health of ourselves and those around us. In the case in Minnesota, authorities say that the attacker left disturbing writings and videos, which often means there were missed chances to flag and to intervene. Now, I know that the videos were posted just right before this occurred, but nothing happened. There should be a system with YouTube that flags that and immediately says, hey, law enforcement, someone needs to see this immediately. There was an opportunity to stop this. We have to be better at that. I'm not blaming YouTube, I'm just saying. We need to have threat assessment teams at every school, administrators, counselors, school resource officers, teachers, standard protocols to evaluate threats and to hand off quickly to care or law enforcement, so those that see things in schools. We need to have low-friction help. We need to have the access to counseling and parents and students that can seek help without stigma or punishment, both in schools and outside of our schools. Again, this kid was outside of school. This 23-year-old was outside of school when he did this. So we need to make these same tools available. Now look, I will never label an entire group as mentally ill. While reports say that federal officials have identified the shooter as transgender, that doesn't mean that every transgender individual is going to go attack someone. But I will say this, transgenderism is a mental health issue. So we're not gonna point finger. Oh, this is it. Yeah, we got him. Another one. This has happened. Conservatives, rah rah. I told you about these folks. No. But we can't ignore it. There are all kinds of mental health issues in America that can lead to these things and situations. This is just the one that happened as I'm recording this yesterday. Today's Thursday, the day I'm recording this. You're hearing this on a Tuesday. This happened on the day prior. We can't label that, but it is a mental health issue. I believe it is a sickness that you would want to change your gender and lob things off and do whatever. And I do believe that part of that, because again, I don't want to speculate about Robin, the person who cowardly undertook this act. There's going to be a lot of study and a lot of stuff. But I guarantee you right now that what he did to himself, to change himself from a man to a woman, affected his mental health. And of course, the Catholic Church does not believe that this is something you should be doing. It does not believe in changing your gender. God made you the way that you are. And clearly he blamed Catholics for some of his problems. And that can't be the case. But mental health in America has to become a forefront focus. America has a mental health emergency. And if someone is spiraling, we need lanes to act fast and fairly, quickly. We've got to get law enforcement involved. We've got to get this data out. And there are other things that I've not covered because, again, this episode is only 30-ish minutes, and I don't have time to get into everything. But mental health is the number one piece that we're missing in so many different areas that lead to this. And then giving law enforcement the tools, and giving courts the onus on ensuring that there are records available and there are orders available to law enforcement and to systems in which you get a background check going to Cabela's to get a gun or going to the gun show to get a gun that stops that from occurring. Stops that sale from occurring. And then we need to work as a government and as a people to continue to get illegal guns off the streets. I do want to turn to a faith perspective very quickly. Not that I want to brush past it, but I'm running out of time. How do you stop evil? And that's another piece of this, right? Mental health, as a Christian, I still believe everything has a spiritual component to it. And so mental health is the earthly manifestation of things like this. And that's part of the fall. But what happened yesterday was pure evil. And laws alone cannot redeem a heart set on destruction. Ephesians 16:12 tells us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood. There is spiritual war under the surface. Now look, I'm not one of those folks that says, oh, my hand got slammed in the door, there must be a spiritual piece to this. Sometimes I'm just an idiot. But I am darn sure that what happened yesterday had spiritual warfare components to it that led us to this place that praying students and kids would be taken off of this earth by an evil man. Our faith response is twofold. We have to just pray. There has to be a spiritual component, prayer and repentance and community and moral formation and protecting the innocent as image bearers of God. And the practical, there has to be vigilance and courage and planning and layered defenses and a culture that values life. That's something we definitely don't do in America. We don't value life the way we should at all stages. We have to honor victims and honor families and honor first responders through our prayer and through the practical. Faith without works is dead. We pray and we prepare, but faith does not replace action. It inspires it. It guides it. And so what do we do here as we kind of close the school safety layers that we need to have? It needs to be calm and not militarized. We need to continue for single, secure entries for visitors. And yes, I do believe in this day and age we need to have security available to help defend against these issues. And to just, I walk into the State House and there are guards everywhere. I'm not saying that there should be 30 cops. I'm not saying that there should be a SWAT unit. We have to continue to provide security to schools. Because also, whatever it is we do in mental health and all these things, again, it's like a macro economy. This is going to take time to sort out if we get serious about it today. And so, in the meantime, we've got to secure our schools. We've got to have quiet hardening of classrooms, inside locking doors, reinforced frames, door sensors, looks normal, works fast. I get it. Everyone here is saying, especially those in the education professionals, like, well, we shouldn't have to have that. I agree. We shouldn't have to have that. We are in a fallen world. And we have to come to terms in reality. And we have to do the practical things, but we also have to be prepared. You can't do one without the other. We've got to do both. Teachers that are willing to be armed should be allowed to do so through training, having proper storage, those kind of, if they want to. If they don't want to, fine. I don't think they should be forced. But I do think that's an option that they should be allowed to have. We need panic notification in schools, one-tap duress alerts, notify 911, all these things. We need to have basic training for first aid and medical. We've got to have people on campus at schools that can defend. Age-appropriate drills, all those things. We have to. We can't ignore what's actually happening today. And I know that there's a lot of studies in other nations that do a lot of things. We should certainly look at some of those. There's a ton of studies, peer-reviewed studies. I had a friend yesterday really lay out a bunch of studies and things about public health and how we can, and what's happening in other countries. I'm not saying that we should, again, a lot of these countries don't allow for gun ownership, but they're super strict. And you have to prove your reason. Again, the Constitution says we have a right to defend ourselves. But we can manage that in a responsible way to keep people with mental health crises and to keep criminals from having these. But then we also, while we're doing that and changing that, we have to prepare our schools and other places. And there's a lot of companies and businesses that have security guards outside or what have you. The same has to be said for school. We're in a fallen world. These countries that have gun bans and stricter gun laws, they still have security in a lot of these places, that they don't just not have it. Heck, in the United Kingdom, half their police aren't even armed. Some people don't take it seriously. All these things should be on the table. And at the end of the day, the parents are our first protectors. These conversations and these things need to be happening at home. Preparedness. And being able, teaching our children how to identify those things, be able to speak up and say something. Hey, my friend has been saying these weird things. We have to do all these things. So again, we need enforcement surge on violent offenders and traffickers. We need the ability for all law enforcement to get a hold of these records. And when I'm not saying records, I'm not saying like your HIPAA, whatever. But if a mental health professional has gone to a court and said this person shouldn't have a gun, or however that process is built, and a judge says, yeah, and it's all signed off, anyone should see that anywhere. I'm not saying there should be, again, I'm against a national registry of guns, but I am for a national database of people who should not be holding a weapon so they don't go somewhere else to get it. We should be looking at due process risk tools. We should be incentivizing secure storage. We should be standardizing school threat assessment teams. We should be scaling school safety layers. That's where we should be putting a lot of this time and effort and money. All these things. It's an all about. It's just like immigration. It can't just be one thing. It can't just be half the piece. We've got to do it all. Cut red tape where it slows help. Tighten rules where they stop killers, and leave law-abiding citizens alone. We can do it all as Americans. And so in closing, what happened in Minneapolis was cowardly, evil, anti-Catholic, domestic terrorism. We grieve the children lost, and we stand with that community as they heal. We don't have to choose between the Second Amendment and the safety of our kids. We can and should choose both with courage, with due process, and with real solutions. America can protect its children and its Constitution. That is not a contradiction. That is our duty. That is what we are called to do. That is who we are. Friends, thank you so much. I know I've gone a little long. This was really important to me. I had asked folks, hey, what I'd posted on social media, what would you like to hear as I'm pre-recording this? And then I saw this happen, and I knew exactly what I had to do. And so I hope I've done that in a balanced and responsible way. This does not change my stance on the Second Amendment, but it does. And I wouldn't say that my stance has changed on how I think these things should be administrated. But as someone who's a newer dad and with my son and any future children we might have, that we can't just stand by and just say, well, Second Amendment says this, that's it. Nope, la 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 la. Can't happen. That is an abdication of our responsibility as Americans, as conservatives, as Christians, as humans. We don't have to give up our constitutional rights. No, we shouldn't be banning certain types of weapons. I don't agree with that. But I do agree with ensuring those that shouldn't have access don't get access. Thank you for listening. God bless you all. We continue to pray and be with all of the families who were affected by this terrible tragedy. And it is time to stand up, work together, and figure this out. Have a good week.